Have you ever walked through a crowded airport and noticed someone sitting all alone? Like the world was rushing forward, but they were stuck in place? Invisible? What if that person wasn't just anyone, but someone whose name once ruled headlines? A man who used to have the world at his feet? Would you still walk past, or would you stop and ask why? That was the question hanging in the air the night a storm battered the glass walls of Gate 17. The rain wasn't gentle. It came down in angry sheets, hammering the airport roof so hard the echoes sounded like drums of war. Travelers shuffled impatiently, families huddled together, and flight announcements kept ringing with the same disappointing word: delayed. And in the middle of all that chaos sat a man in a custom wheelchair. His name was Julian Cross, a name once whispered with awe in Silicon Valley. He had been a billionaire CEO, a pioneer of tech innovation, the kind of man reporters called untouchable. But tonight there was no entourage, no investors waiting for his handshake. Just Julian, alone, staring at the storm, clutching his phone as if it might somehow connect him back to the life he lost. I have to pause here because I can't shake the image. A man who could once buy entire companies with a single signature, now being overlooked like a piece of furniture. That's what struck me most. You see, people rarely admit it, but society has a cruel way of treating those who appear broken. Wealth doesn't shield you from loneliness. Power doesn't protect you from pain. Julian flinched when the thunder cracked. Imagine that. A billionaire trembling like a child. But it wasn't just the storm outside that made him jump. It was the storm inside. Every thunderclap dragged him back to the car accident, glass shattering around him, the weight of steel crushing his legs, the drunk teenager behind the wheel disappearing into the night. The doctors had called him lucky. But tell me, do you call it luck when you lose your independence, your dignity, and every so-called friend who once swore loyalty? His assistant had quit. His board had voted him out. His phone, once buzzing with opportunity, now only vibrated with one more delay. His back throbbed. His pride hurt worse. And for 3 hours, he sat at that gate, invisible, until there it was. A laugh. Not the tired laugh of business partners or the fake chuckle of reporters. No, this was something else. Bright, high, like a spark in the dark. He turned his head and saw her. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, spinning in circles by the window, her pink sneakers squeaking against the tile floor. She was joy incarnate, the kind of joy Julian hadn't felt in years. Trailing after her was her mother, a young woman with tired eyes and a strength in her walk that only comes from surviving more than her fair share of battles. Her name, Julian would soon learn, was Maya Evans. She was a single mom, juggling night shifts at the hospital and raising her daughter Sophie. Most people in airports don't stop. They see a man in a wheelchair and either stare too long or look away too quickly. Parents whisper to their kids not to bother him, but this time was different. Sophie tugged on Maya's sleeve, pointed right at Julian, and whispered, "Mommy, why is that man all alone?" Julian's chest tightened. He braced himself for the pity parade, for the forced smile, the awkward kindness that wasn't real. But Maya didn't look away. She didn't pretend not to notice him. She looked straight at him, not through him, and said words Julian hadn't heard in so long he almost forgot how to answer. "Excuse me, sir. Are you okay? You look like you could use some company." And just like that, the storm outside wasn't the loudest thing in the room anymore. Julian opened his mouth, but his voice cracked. "Just waiting for my flight," he croaked. Sophie tilted her head and asked, innocent as ever, "Are you scared of the storm?" Julian almost laughed. This little girl didn't see a billionaire. She didn't see a failure. She saw a man, just a man, who looked sad. And in that moment, Julian Cross, the once untouchable CEO, felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt seen. Maya sat down beside him. Sophie climbed into her mother's lap, her coloring book pressed against her knees. And suddenly, Julian wasn't invisible anymore. "We're heading to Seattle," Maya said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "My sister just had a baby. What about you?" Julian hesitated. His name still made headlines sometimes. He didn't want the shift in tone, the fake politeness, the recognition of power. So he simply said, "I'm Julian. Just Julian." And Maya, God bless her, just nodded. No recognition, no calculated smile. Just one weary adult talking to another, with a little girl who thought everyone deserved a second chance. They got hot chocolate together from the cafe. Maya insisted on paying, carefully counting out her change, despite Julian knowing he could have bought the entire place with the swipe of a card. She said with quiet authority, "Nobody sits in a cold airport with nothing warm to drink. Not on my watch." I have to stop again here, because that line hit me. Imagine, a woman who barely had enough for herself choosing to spend what little she had to make sure a stranger felt less alone. That's what real wealth looks like. Not stocks, not mansions. Compassion. Sophie showed Julian her coloring book. Maya told him about her life, the long hospital shifts, the bills she struggled to cover, the husband she'd lost in a construction accident. She said it plainly, without self-pity, and yet it cut through Julian like glass. Here he was wallowing in loss, but she had been clawing her way through survival and still found space to be kind. When Sophie asked him, point blank, "Are you lonely?" Julian couldn't lie. "Yes," he whispered. His throat burned. Maya placed her hand gently over his. "Loneliness is heavy," she said softly. "I thought I'd drown in it after Matt died. But sometimes the cure isn't finding someone who needs you. It's finding someone who sees you." That sentence didn't just hit Julian. It hits me too, even as I retell it. Because isn't that what we all want? Not to be fixed, not to be pitied, just to be seen. The storm outside kept raging, the delays piled up. But for the first time in months, Julian wasn't counting the hours. He was listening to Sophie's dreams of joining science club, to Maya's laughter that cracked through her exhaustion, to the quiet reminder that even broken men can still be human. And that, my friends, is where everything began. The storm raged on, thunder rattling the glass walls of the terminal as if the sky itself wanted to remind everyone that control was an illusion. Travelers groaned when the loudspeaker announced yet another delay, and then, finally, the words nobody wanted to hear. "Attention passengers of Flight 482. Your flight has been canceled. Please proceed to the service desk for rebooking." Instantly, the calm order of the airport dissolved into chaos. People scrambled toward the desk, pulling out credit cards, calling hotels, demanding answers. Maya stood up, her daughter clinging to her hand, and Julian could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. Where would they sleep tonight? How could she stretch her last few dollars to cover a hotel in a city as expensive as this one? Julian watched her count the bills in her wallet, slowly, like she was measuring oxygen. Something inside him twisted. He'd once spent more on a single business lunch than this woman had to her name, and yet she'd been the one who bought him hot chocolate. That's when the words left his mouth before he could think better of them. You could stay with me tonight. Both of you. No strings attached. I've got a big house. More rooms than I'll ever use." Maya froze. The protectiveness in her face was instant, like a mother lion. She glanced at Sophie, then back at Julian. "I don't know," she began cautiously. Sophie's eyes went wide, sparkling. "Like a sleepover?" she squealed. Julian almost laughed for the first time in months. "Yeah," he said, smiling softly at her. "Like a sleepover." After a long pause, Maya nodded. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was Sophie's pleading. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because deep down she sensed Julian wasn't lying when he said there were no strings. The drive to Julian's mansion was silent at first. His chauffeur kept glancing in the mirror, surprised to see his boss accompanied by a woman and child. When they pulled up to the sprawling estate, Maya's lips parted in disbelief. Marble pillars, manicured lawns, lights glowing through tall windows. It was a palace. Carrying Sophie in her arms, Maya whispered, "Why us?" Julian turned his wheelchair toward her, his voice low but firm. "Because you made me feel like a person again, and I haven't felt that in a long time." Inside, the house was cold, not in temperature, but in spirit. Gleaming surfaces, crystal chandeliers, and wide, echoing halls. But all Julian saw was emptiness, until Sophie. The little girl darted through the rooms, giggling as if she'd discovered a castle built just for her. She touched the grand piano, pressed her nose against the glass to stare at the gardens, and tugged on Maya's hand with excitement. For the first time, Julian's house felt alive. Later that night, Julian found Maya in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea, tears silently streaming down her face. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I'm just tired," she admitted. "I work so hard and it never feels like enough. Sophie missed science club because I couldn't spare $30. $30. She laughed bitterly. "You must think I'm pathetic." Julian's chest ached. "No," he said firmly. "I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." Her eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them. Two people drowning in loneliness, finding a lifeline in each other. Over the next few days, something shifted. Maya and Sophie didn't leave right away. The storm had delayed more flights, and Julian quietly arranged things so they could stay longer. Maya began helping around the house, cooking meals, organizing shelves, filling the silence with her humming. Sophie taped her drawings on the refrigerator, her laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Even Mrs. Walsh, the stern housekeeper who rarely smiled, softened under Sophie's relentless charm. And Julian? For the first time in months, he didn't wake up dreading the day. He woke up listening for Sophie's footsteps, for Maya's voice. Still, there were moments of weakness. One afternoon, while working with his physical therapist, Julian froze. The therapist asked him to transfer from his chair onto a training bench. His hands shook. His chest tightened. "What if I fall?" he whispered. That's when Maya knelt beside him, her eyes steady. "So what if you fall?" "Sophie falls all the time. She just gets up. That's life." Sophie clapped her hands. "Come on, Mr. Julian, you can do it." And with their faith in him, he did. He made the transfer. And when Sophie threw her arms around him, like he'd just conquered a mountain, Julian felt more powerful than he ever had in the boardroom. Little by little, his mansion transformed. No longer a museum of wealth, but a home. They cooked meals together, argued over who made the best pancakes, shared late-night conversations on the porch while Sophie dozed off. Julian began to laugh again, really laugh, not the polite chuckle he used to give at corporate dinners. One evening, under the garden's string lights that had gathered dust for years, Maya turned to him. "Julian, did you ever think you'd get a second chance at happiness?" His heart pounded. He reached for her hand. "Not until you and Sophie walked into my life." The kiss they shared was soft, tentative. Two people who had been broken, but found something worth piecing together. Sophie caught them from the window, grinning so wide her little face nearly split in two. 3 months later, Julian didn't just propose to Maya. He knelt before Sophie too, ring in hand, and asked, "Will you both be my family?" The answer was yes. Yes to love. Yes to healing. Yes to second chances. The wedding was small, just the three of them in the garden, Sophie scattering rose petals down the path. That day, Julian officially adopted her, making real what had already been true in his heart. Now their home isn't silent anymore. It's noisy, messy, alive. Maya still clips coupons at the kitchen table, but she does it while Sophie works on her science projects and Julian helps however he can. He's not the billionaire in the chair anymore. He's a husband, a father, a man who finally realized that the real measure of wealth is the family sitting at his dinner table. And maybe that's the lesson here for all of us. You can lose your power, you can lose your pride, but if you're lucky enough, life will place someone in your path who doesn't see your wheelchair, your scars, or your failures. They'll see you. So I'll leave you with Julian's own words, the ones he shared that night in the garden. Sometimes the people we need most aren't the ones we search for. They're the ones who stop, look at us, and say, "Why are you all alone?" And that one question can change everything.